Well, a very good morning to you. Thank you for keeping it KBC Channel 1. We do interrupt the normal programming. That was the rugby match going on there, Samoa versus Hong Kong, to take you right to the what is happening at Radisson Blu, where the head of state, that is President William Ruto, is also expected to attend the function. This is a meeting of the Eastern and Southern African Trade Development Bank Group. As you can see it on your screen, it's already ongoing there. And let's listen in to what the president is saying.
Ministers present and TDB shareholders and representatives, my good friend, Mr. Ademasu Tadese, TDB Group President and MD, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, guests and visitors, good morning. Let me first take this opportunity to, on behalf of the people of Kenya, to be grateful to TDB Group for the presentation of the $100,000 to Thome Water project in Laikipia. I can confirm that they deserve every support. And it is true, they've gone through a difficult time of failed rains over the last 5 seasons. When I looked at the check, I was keen. The signature was missing. So please remember to sign. Remember to sign the check. Everywhere in the world, the challenge of effective leadership has always presented itself in terms of ability to successfully achieve development objectives in a dynamic and complex operating environment. At all times, sustainable development is expected to take place within a context characterized by increasingly devastating threats and weaknesses across all sectors. In our time, everyone interested in growing the economy by increasing wealth, creating jobs, eradicating poverty, and reducing inequality has to confront the fundamental challenge of an increasingly tight fiscal space and the emergence of rapidly mutating and highly complicated new threats. All these threats have been explained to us today in the morning, from what happened with COVID all the way to the very unlikely, or so it was thought, war in the middle of Europe, and in between, and especially the big threat of these challenges and threats can encumber economies to be so oppressive that pessimism of the prospects of growth become mainstream, and the idea that some regions of the world are not doing well at all begin to take root. It is true that post-colonial Africa struggled to develop very limited resources to liberate its economy that were extractive by design, a low industrial capacity that ensured that raw materials were mainly exported, minimal economic diversity, and of course the challenge of political instability. Efforts to acquire resources to break out of this vicious circle of underdevelopment and poverty only plunged many of our economies into an inescapable debt trap, which reduced the resources available to initiate progressive programs and policies, and at the same time made governments more vulnerable to natural as well as human threats across many sectors. The nomenclature of economic classification and development categories is quite telling, with least developed countries and heavily indebted poor countries becoming normalized methods of describing post-colonial Africa and other states of the global South. Recent high-profile events have demonstrated that the entire global economy is generally vulnerable to shocks and disruptions due to growing economic interdependence and globalization. At the same time, they also economies have greater capacity to invest in measures to improve recovery from these events and resilience to future threats. These measures are often taken at the expense of more vulnerable counterparts, whose prospects invariably depend on closer cooperation on terms defined as equity and justice. Volatility in global commodity prices has always exposed the vulnerability of many economies. Often, prices of raw materials exported from these economies collapse drastically, while at the same time, that of such essential imports as petroleum rises steeply. Every episode of such crisis sinks our economies deeper into difficulty, weakening currencies, raising interest rates, and increasing inflation. The most fundamental legacy of COVID-19 now stands as the manner in which it exposed global inequality and injustice. As movement was severely curtailed by the closure of borders and grounding of aviation services, global supply chains were constricted and disrupted, leading to unprecedented distortion of market dynamics everywhere. Many developed industrial nations immediately redirected investments towards the development of essential supplies, including vaccines and protectives, which were stockpiled, exposing importing countries to a near catastrophe. The post-pandemic situation has been difficult, to say the least. We are still on a recovery path, rebuilding after the devastation of tourism, transport, and export sectors. Inevitably, we have taken a massive hit in terms of worsened fiscal imbalance and deeper debt, which has been worsened by the emergence of a high interest rate environment. The geopolitical tension that exploded into open conflict in Ukraine have also intensified this very difficult situation. But that is not the end of the matter for Africa. Our plate is stacked much higher with urgent and serious problems. Our continent is experiencing extreme weather events of unprecedented variety, frequency, and magnitude. Flooding, wildfires, landslides, droughts, cyclones, and other disasters have inflicted a dire toll on communities across our continent. The Sahel, West Africa, Central Africa, the Horn of Africa, East and Southern Africa have all been affected by these serious calamities. Human life, damage to property, and the destruction of infrastructure have not only worsened suffering for vulnerable people, but also dampened economic prospects. It has become inescapably clear that adverse climatic events are actively threatening our hard-won development gains, including advances in providing public services like health, education, security, and investment in national infrastructure like transport and communication networks. Reflection on these matters have also defined a critical weakness in the prevailing thinking in development and climate action, which treats the two imperatives as separate, unrelated undertakings. In the course of engaging the international community on these twin imperatives, African countries have found common ground in their unique shared perspectives as climate action frontline territories located at the intersection between environmental disasters, economic crisis, and development constraints. We recognize at once that the adverse impacts of climate change pose real and serious threats to all our achievements as well as prospects with regard to development, and that at the same time, financial capacity and therefore economic development is urgently needed to provide necessary resources to invest in effective climate action. Increasingly, we are having to make the difficult choice between economic growth and climate action, when, as a matter of fact, both courses of action must be pursued simultaneously because they are complementary. One will not happen without the other. On the basis of this realization, African countries have begun to approach multilateral engagement on climate change and economic development from a new perspective, anchored on a commitment to a green, climate-positive growth, and which profiles Africa as the green continent of the future, abounding with natural resources, investment opportunities, and human capital. What I'm trying to say here is that we have to reposition ourselves. We have to reposition our continent in the context of the situation, the challenges that face the globe, and we have to reposition ourselves in the context of the assets that we have. Renewable assets, being the continent with almost 65% of uncultivated arable land, being the continent that has the youngest human capital, and being the continent that has the greatest potential for greening growth and ensuring that we decarbonize industrialization, decarbonize manufacturing, and we have to reposition ourselves, represent Africa in a different way, away from the continent that was always profiled with all the negative adjectives. Climate change has brought some measure of equality, let me say. In the context of climate change, there is no developing or developed country. We are all in the same place. And being there in the same place positions us as a continent to take advantage of the assets that we have, the renewable assets that we have, the human capital that we have. In any case, by 2050, a quarter of the world's population will be living in our continent. And because of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we have managed to assemble 1.4 billion people into one single market. And the place of DTB as a financial institution in that context cannot be taken for granted. It is my belief that TDB will be today $8.5 billion asset bank, but in the next 10 years, maybe 20 billion asset bank. That way, we can leverage on the increasing footprint of TDB alongside all the other institutions that we are developing in our continent. And that is why last week, during the AU media meeting, we proposed that TDB, Afrexim Bank, AFC, ATI be now elevated from being partners of the AU to being special agencies of the Africa Union, so that we can give this institution greater recognition, we can give them better profiling, and we can, as a continent, use their services so that we can grow their capacity to be able to support the trajectory we are all pushing of creating one market and working together as a continent to eliminate barriers to trade, to investment, to business, and be able to create much more prosperity, create more jobs, and position our continent appropriately, because it is on our shoulders to do it. Nobody will do it for us. We must proactively, deliberately, we must be intentional, about positioning ourselves in that space, because that's the only way we can get ahead of the situation that we are all in. The first implication of this paradigm naturally has been the now widely accepted view that the present architecture of the international economic development framework is deficient and inadequate for the challenges of our time. The Bretton Woods institution system of multilateral financial institution was explicitly designed for another purpose, at another place, and at another time, and is now fundamentally inadequate, unjust, and sometimes unfit for the demands of our complex, dynamic, and interdependent world. We must work with them in the context of how do we reform, how do we work with the international financial architecture to recreate it so that it becomes much more responsive in terms of scale of resources available, cost of resources available, and efficiency in how much time those resources are made available. I think there is a healthy, robust debate, and I expect African financial institutions like TDB to be front and center in that conversation so that they can give our perspective from our continent in that debate so that we are not negatively profiled all the time as a risky destination for investment or for development financing. And please, DDB, don't join the people who profile us as a risky place. You should be the ones to say Africa is the best place to invest and that we are not risky at all. In fact, this is the continent that has the highest return on investment, and everybody should be heading in this direction because in any case, we are the continent of the future. At the International Monetary Fund, European nations took 160 billion of the 2021 issue of special drawing rights, compared to African countries' cumulative amount of 34 billion. I'm very happy that today we will be sharing some shares from TDB and we will be in a good place, different from the situation I'm describing here. An institutional blueprint which administers development financing this way must be changed urgently, and one made that is fit for purpose. The urgent need for socio-economic transformation must therefore translate into an even more urgent need to redesign the international financial institutions and also design and implement a wholly new global green bank to mobilize resources globally and administer them in a truly inclusive, representative, democratic, and equitable manner. Is that all we need to meet the fierce urgency of now? Hardly. The Pan-African aspiration for socio-economic transformation based on Agenda 2063 looks at African solutions as the primary intervention in confronting African problems. At the forefront of this agenda is regional and continental integration aimed at unlocking Africa's potential on a scale that will make our continent the epicenter of a new industrial age. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is both a continental and a global game changer. Its scale is unprecedented. The upshot is that it has already inaugurated a market with a population of 1.4 billion people, of the world's youngest people. The critical imperative in integration is the elimination of barriers and borders and the intensification of connectivity through road, rail, port, and fiber optic networks. Investment opportunities are clear and compelling and also abundant in our continent. At this moment, Africa needs a development financing institution framework that can handle this unprecedented opportunity effectively and deliver transformation in terms of integration through connectivity, economic development, and climate resilience. This is why I am proud to be here today to celebrate with the Trade and Development Bank. TDB has demonstrated to us that it has been studying the African development landscape and evolving to meet its challenges. As a result, it has been growing and evolving steadily. The journey from the PTA Bank to TDB Bank has not been one of mere rebranding or superficial change. Our region signaled its irrevocable commitment to expand and accelerate economic integration when the preferential trade area transformed into COMESA for East and Central Africa, and its financial arm, the PTA Bank, followed. Only a decade ago, TDB had an asset base of $1 billion. It has since experienced a tenfold, almost, expansion of its asset base and is active across global financial markets, including New York, London, UAE, China, India, and Japan. The bank also has a commanding footprint across the continent with presence in Mauritius, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as its headquarters in Burundi. Most encouragingly, it is gaining visibility as a strong investor in strategic development projects. You've heard about the Lake Turkana wind power, and an effective partner in economic transformation. In fact, we in Kenya have witnessed the bank's capacity, dynamism, and expertise from close quarters. As a nation undertaking an ambitious trade agenda under the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, as well as a continental and global leader in green and renewable energy, it has been encouraging to have the TDB as a partner in mobilizing financing for various initiatives and projects. For instance, the bank collaborated with other partners, including commercial banks, to successfully arrange and disburse more than $500 million of trade financing to various entities and long-term capital for SMEs. The bank has also been an active supporter of many local enterprises in cross-border investment, thereby promoting the integration agenda both in word and also in deed. As a founding member and one of 46 sovereign and institutional shareholders of the bank, we are proud of TDB's growth and transformation. As an African success story, TDB not only anchors our aspiration for regional and Pan-African integration, it repositions Africa as the emerging site of global transformation and complements our agenda of redefining our continent as the home of abundant opportunity and potential. This capacity to profile Africa effectively in terms of more possibilities and less limits is a significant contribution that unites the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2063, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and a new approach to effective climate action and economic transformation. On this 39th annual meeting of the Trade and Development Bank, I see promise and I also see opportunity. I take this opportunity to appreciate the leadership of my good friend, Mr. Admasu Tadesse. He was among the first people when I was sworn into office to come and offer me some advice, which I take very seriously. Mr. Managing Director, I credit you for your great leadership and vision and the leadership you have provided to your team at the TDB, and you have our support as Government of Kenya and as a shareholder in your great institution. Congratulations to the entire group for your excellent achievements as were listed by the CEO. I wish you all good luck and great success as you continue to work the work of shining a light on Africa as the continent of the future. You have all our support, and I am also, like Professor Ndungu, looking forward to the dividends. This afternoon. And to all the good people who have come from different parts, and even the people who are joining from Ghana and from Senegal, we welcome you to this institution, and we look forward to working with you and making sure that we build a financial institution that will support the development of our continent, the progress of our countries, and to support what we must do to create opportunities, create jobs, create enterprise, and make sure that we deal with the challenges of underdevelopment and deal also with the challenges of poverty and create wealth for our nations. You have all our support, you have all our encouragement, and whatever it is that we can do at the policy level, please let us know, so that we can support these institutions to be built, because we are benefiting from institutions that have been built by others. We have an opportunity to build these institutions, and we must not miss that opportunity to support these institutions so that they can play their role better. Thank you very much. God bless you. Unfortunately, I have to go. I have an appointment with the good people who have hired me. So I have to honor that appointment somewhere out of town, but I hope you enjoy the rest of your deliberations. Asante sana.
Secretary and the CS Treasury before we do the national anthem, then we exit. So, His Excellency the President, TDB, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, and the CS Treasury.
There you have it, President William Ruto addressing the 39th AGM of the DTB Bank, that is the Eastern and Southern African Trade Development Bank, during their annual general meeting, just emphasizing the fact that Africa has a huge potential in as far as economic development is concerned. He spoke to the fact that Africa has the largest arable land which can actually be tapped in as far as agriculture is concerned, the largest human capital, and even potential for renewable energy. He talked about the need to remove trade barriers. Remember, one of the trade barriers that has been removed is the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is an AU 2063 Agenda 2063. So he spoke to that, talking about the debt trap that African countries find themselves in, and calling for reforms, especially when it comes to multilateral financial institutions. So without further ado,